As was already mentioned, we're exceptional individuals and we'll be speaking on neurodiversity today. The reason we've been invited to do so is because we are specialists in this area, coming from a strengths-based and lived experience perspective. And it was actually Unlimited who introduced us to SIB, so shout out to them. We've had a strong relationship with them ever since the founding of EI, and it's still going strong, so bonus. And yeah, this is the team version of it in any case, and we handle a variety of work-related provision for those with neurodiversity, including community engagement, which today might qualify as, but also, for example, audits, coaching, and assessments, which are the areas that I'm involved in personally. The majority of staff are neurodivergent. We do have a kind of cap, a minimum cap, but we tend to go above that because we just find that the people that do what we want them to do tend to be like-minded. Similarly, we're a social enterprise in the sense that we provide many services that support people into work rather than just focusing on people in work. Okay, I'm going to, the second half is going to segue into a conversation which I'll help moderate, and so my colleague Darl will be taking on from there. But in the meantime, I was asked by Selma, could you explain what is neurodiversity? So let's start with that. So neurodiversity is actually a bit misleading because neurodiversity, which I'm sure is a term everyone's heard by now, refers to all cognitive variation. So it doesn't matter what you have, you're neurodiverse, on the grounds that the person next to you might not be the same as you. Neurodivergence, on the other hand, is specifically referring to learning difference and neurodevelopmental conditions, such as some as below, which are provided statistics for. Another warning is I won't be reading directly off of the slides for flow. I'll simply be alluding to the material. So yeah, the big four is as in these are the ones that are most common and most commonly known. However, there are rarer examples that are just as valid, including dyscalculia, which can affect sequencing numbers calculations, dysgraphia, which can affect transcription, writing, measurement, and synesthesia, which can most quickly be described as an atypical reaction to sensation. So most people feel the same way regarding a sound or a smell, and that might not be the case with synesthesia. And most importantly, we have to remember that there are positives. This is just a random range of what you might find from an employee with neurodivergence. Obviously not all of them for one person, and it is worth noting that they can be the opposite. That doesn't change the fact that we need to remember that they're there, and particularly if that's what we're looking for, you know, we don't want to be counting people out prematurely. Back to the big four, I just wanted to quickly demonstrate that along with the things you think you do know, there's probably elements that you're not so aware of. So the first one here is that processing affects all neurodiversity, and that can include cognitive functions such as cognitive faculties such as memory, for instance, but also that there's usually some small print that's worth knowing. So for instance, if you read the first paragraph of any description of dyspraxia, it will reference it purely as a physical condition, when in reality in work, it's actually the mental processing side that's causing difficulty, assuming they have any. Similarly, a quick look at how these things can either resemble each other or legitimately be occurring simultaneously. When I said quick, I meant it. All right, so a little on language now. So skipping straight to the bottom, advice above, please read. Atypical is actually a very general term, just meaning not average. However, you tend to only hear it regarding autism. Can't specifically say why, other than it probably originated regarding autism, but technically it's quite a general term. High functioning is something that used to show up as a formal diagnosis, typically again under autism, but not so much these days. People still use it, but it's not so much a technical term anymore, medically speaking. Cognitive faculties, I mentioned those earlier, so just referring to the brain's ability to process. The other thing I said was executive function. So again, things like memory can be really interlinked with neurodivergence. Comorbidity refers to several at once, so we call that co-occurring now, just because it's more pleasant, but medically this is still an accurate term. And reasonable adjustments, referring to the employer's responsibility to provide basic alterations for staff dependent on their needs. How to support someone who's neurodivergent within your staff. So identify, assess, and implement ASAP. So again, don't wait for them to tell you. It is worth noting there is guidance on what you can and can't say before you've hired someone, but nonetheless, ASAP. Sooner is always better. Be patient and understanding, not meaning leave them to their own devices, meaning if the 10th thing doesn't work, move on to the 11th. Don't be afraid to engage, i.e. there's nothing worse than doing nothing because you're worried about doing the wrong thing. Because while that's happening, they're not receiving the support they might need. Come from a strengths-based approach, because again, when I say support, it automatically sounds negative, but it might just mean, okay, why don't you do less of that, more of that? It can be that simple, and it doesn't have to be disruptive. Come from a study up, things are always changing. So like I said about, for instance, the phrase comorbidity, and phraseology is always shifting. We don't say Asperger anymore, for instance, certainly not as a formal diagnosis, but it's still valid historically speaking. Follow their lead, include them. There's no good parachuting in what you think is going to work best if you haven't checked with them. Like the same way that we check, are you allergic to anything? We should be checking, is there a reason this won't work for you? Collect and use valid data. So we collect data all the time on demographics, and yet some reason this one is avoided, even though some of the others that we collect data on are also protected demographics. So just like race and gender, the disability side is protected, but you're still allowed to ask certain things depending on the circumstances. So my suggestion is sometimes perhaps we should encourage disclosure. Again, the sooner you know, the better. So tell people, please tell us and we can help you. Only if it's true, obviously, but I'm hoping it is. Create a joint network or join a network. So exceptional individuals provide various services to various companies, or you could start an internal group, and whatever it might be, make sure that there are someone that can be reached out to that understands, or the arrange a workplace needs assessment. So hopefully some of the audience are already aware of this provision, but the different from a desk review, workplace needs assessment will go over any challenges that's being faced and make recommendations and what could be done moving forward to help bridge those. So not only is it great for awareness, but it also provides some options moving forward. And consider access to work. So this is a government scheme, and I definitely hope you've heard of this, that supports disability in the workplace. So for neurodivergence specifically, exceptional individuals can support and provide with workplace needs assessments and navigating the access to work process. But it's worth noting that for any disability, and these days even to some degree for mental health issues or concerns, you can contact Access to Work directly, and there's a chance that they will be able to determine and fund support and factor in intersectionality. So while a holistic approach is always best from my perspective, you first need to identify the constituent parts that make up a thing. Certainly don't just focus on one, or worse still, ignore all of it. And miscellaneous. So these are just areas and facts that don't fit into one core group that are nonetheless extremely important. So neurodivergence is a disability legally under the grounds of the definition under the Equality Act 2010 amendment, i.e. a long-term difficulty that causes day-to-day issues. We definitely fall under that. And so for businesses, it's really important to know that. Neurodivergent individuals can be at higher risk of mental illness. So what we mean by that is not only might our brains gear us more towards, say, addictive personality and so on, but also because of our learned experience often being negative early on, because people, you know, that we're not receiving support yet, we can drag that into adulthood, which can also have a negative knock-on effect on mental health. Neurodiversity is considered a hidden disability. So again, kind of mental health adjacent. Basically, some people, if they can't see it, they won't believe it. Like they might acknowledge it conceptually, but not actually take it on board as a thing. And it's really important that everyone understands it is a thing, for lack of a better phrase. It is often cited that women are underdiagnosed. Two reasons given for this is one, that symptoms vary and they tend to be less overt in their symptoms, and another is that similarly females naturally develop how to blend in better than males, and so it goes unnoticed for that reason. Co-occurring, anyone can have anything. The options are infinite. I myself, for instance, have both dyslexia and dyspraxia, which are a common duo, but it could just as easily be anything else, and is also the chance of something else in my profile also. Similarly, it does run in the family, but it jumps. So what I mean by that is you might not have it, but all your children might have, say, dyslexia. And some of theirs might, and some of theirs might not. And also, just for fun, something else might get thrown into the mix, like a history of dyslexia, but one case of autism, whether that be high support needs or low support needs. And finally, no two instances are the same. Just like with anything else, you could get two dyslexics in the same room who are the same age and the same gender, but they aren't going to match, not just in terms of personality, but in terms of their traits specific. So yeah, it's a good time to add that we'll be holding questions right to the end, but we promise that the audience will have the opportunity to speak. So that's me out of the way. I'm now going to pass on to my colleague Darlene, who's going to reintroduce a couple of the topics that we just touched upon, and then I'm going to navigate a conversation with her and some service user guests. So please welcome Darlene.
Thank you, Tim. And hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. So yeah, my name is Darl. I'm the coordinator of the career support programs here at Exceptional Individuals. Uh, I am by no means a public speaker, and I might forget to breathe during this intro. So anytime I do, just let me know that I'm not breathing. So I've been doing this job since July last year, and we offer career coaching and mentoring for free for people who suspect that they might be neurodivergent or have that diagnosis. I myself came to know EI through an online support group for Black women and non-binary folk with ADHD. And I applied for the coaching that EI provides and ended up getting a job instead. And yeah, as you can see on the screen, intersectionality, well, that's the reason Tim invited me to talk today. I guess add a bit of seasoning to the session.
On that subject, I said she. I do apologize about that.
Thank you, Tim. So intersectionality, simply put, is about how certain aspects of who you are will increase the access to the good things or your exposure to the bad things in life. It's the idea that the social and political aspects of our identity don't exist in isolation. For example, quick intro to myself. I was born in Sweden 28 years ago to East African immigrant parents. Outwardly feminine presenting, but feel acknowledged, just as Tim did there, by gender neutral pronouns. And I got my ADHD diagnosis, combined type, just less than a year ago. So that combines inattentiveness, impulsivity, and hyperactivity, which means that my brain pretty much flits between like white noise and bingo balls ping-ponging around with like strobe lights. But I also suspect that there might be autistic spectrum disorder thrown in that mix as well. What else?
Yeah, that can be it for now, if you're up for it.
I was going to say that even with that list of things, I know that I'm more than some of those parts, and my neurodivergent experience doesn't exist in that isolation. It's influenced by each of those elements. And I compare it to like trying to bake a cake and just focusing on the eggs if I'm treating my neurodivergence as its own thing. Yeah, that's the intro to me, and I guess back to Tim to intro the rest of our lovely guests.
Yes, we also have some service users with us, Mihaela and Raj. Hello.
Hello.
So starting with Raj, I think, do you want to intro yourself in a similar fashion?
Thanks, Tim. Thank you, everyone, for giving me an opportunity to be in front of you today. My name's Raj. I grew up in a different time. I grew up in the 70s when things like sort of mental health and, you know, would be, I think the phrase today is deemed a first world problem. My parents were just busy making sure we had a roof over our heads, and the fact you couldn't do something wasn't down to anything to do with your mental ability. It was more a question of lack of ability. So I've sort of wandered through life. For me, intersectionality is just life. I'm trying to learn more about it, but it's just life. We've all got intersectionality, whether it's fat, thin, this, that. There's other pressures which are more heavily weighted, obviously, but I'm still learning about that element. My experience in terms of neurodiversity was that I interviewed someone. They had a requirement for additional support. HR were very supportive, got in touch with EI, and I was working with Tim at EI to give my colleague as much support as possible. It was the right thing to do. It wasn't just a tick box exercise, and gosh, did I need it, because you think you are equipped. I mean, you think that based on your own experience, you think you'll be able to deal with it, and logic and reason is the right way. It's not. You know, it doesn't matter how intelligent you are, get help from the right people. It worked. I mean, the person, you know, how do you deal with somebody who's got chronic anxiety? I mean, you know, even though I've had anxiety, I mean, it's a different thing, and everybody's different. But the person in question got the guidance they needed. I went on a massive sort of learning journey, and I think the best way I can describe it for me is that I then became a client, because I sort of looked back at my life and discovered that, do you know what, maybe depression at 14, 16, 18, 21, oh, at 30, and then realizing when I got chronic fatigue syndrome and ME around 40, that, do you know what, maybe I've had depression all my life. I've just not known how to deal with it, apart from just get on with it. I had a good job, great career, worked all the hours God sent, had all the opportunities. It was brilliant. Just didn't plan for the fact of chronic fatigue syndrome, where you know, you just get aches, pains for no reason. I mean, in terms of the help that's available, I mean, I went to my GP, I went to any GP I could find on my street, your street, and Harley Street. You know, I've seen psychologists, psychiatrists, rheumatologists, neurologists, everyone and anything to do with chronic fatigue syndrome and ME. Got back to work, and continued seeing consultants, had every part of my body scanned, MRI, CT, and then ended up with burnout and had 2 years off work. So my sort of journey of coming back to work and then having exposure to EI, it's been really helpful for me. And I suppose I'm smiling today, but I could tell you this, that there's been years, weeks, months when I've just cried and thought, I'm on a scrap pile. Never mind, you know, 2 years off work. I lost my job, you know, got divorced. It all came at once. Nothing equips you for everything at once. So having the right people help you makes a lot of difference.
Thank you very much, Raj. And Mihaela?
Yes, hello, I'm Mihaela. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today in front of all of you. And what I can say is that I completely resonate with what Raj and Darlene just said earlier. I found myself in a lot of elements that they described. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, I was born, raised, and educated in Romania. I'm a neurodivergent. I discovered that I am a neurodivergent around a year ago. I arrived in the UK around 4 years ago, and ever since then, I had quite the journey of discovering myself in new circumstances and how I can adapt to new environments and new challenges. And since the COVID came, I ended up being in a management position. And that was the moment when this introspection process started, basically. And that's how I found exceptional individuals. And it was quite the relief when I discovered online that all those struggles that I've been going through are very similar to other people. And I was very relieved to find out that I can actually be a part of this community of neurodivergent people who can share their experiences and join projects that are very meaningful to them and that can actually have a meaningful change and impact to society in general. So in a nutshell, I think that's pretty much it, but you will most probably find out more during our conversation, which is about to get more interesting, I think.
Well, already interesting enough from my perspective, but thank you, Mihaela. So yeah, for me, as a straight male white boy that was neither too short nor too tall, I felt I had it made right up until age 6, where I was told I was dyslexic, but not statemented, which that far back is what they refer to as the diagnosis documentation. So what I'd be interested in knowing was the start of the journey for you, in terms of when did you first notice that you were doing things differently, or when did someone point that out for you? So Mihaela, as you just spoke, I think Raj, if you could kick us off.
Gosh, when did I know? Probably do things differently throughout my life. Probably been told by other people. I've been quite proud of doing things differently. It's not affected me. It only affected me when I got ME and got burnt out. And then when I went back to work, what they don't teach you, what no course and nothing I've read teaches you is this: you lose your work fitness the longer you're off work. Just getting up, getting organized, right? Getting out of the house, getting on a tube, getting off at the right station. Gosh, I went to the same building for 20 years. And having had 2 years off work, I then went back to the same building and missed the tube stop. It's just, you lose all of it. And that work fitness, your feet ache, everything. And it's at that point when I realized, oh my gosh, I think whether or not I've really then recognized how different I was. You know, any other moment of insight that had happened before with any therapy, counseling, YouTube, Wikipedia, or anything else, it was just irrelevant. It just obliterated, it just disappeared and vaporized. And it was like, oh my God, how do I just get through a day? You know, and here I am 4 years later and actively going to work, and yeah, I'm working from home some days and there's some flex. It's not all rosy, but it's got rosier since I had a few conversations with Tim, and at that point when he was talking about stuff, it's sort of like a light bulb moment where you're going, oh my gosh, that's me. Oh my gosh, that's me. Oh, I tick that box as well. And if I had a long list, the amount of boxes I've probably ticked by now, and it was quite nice. I went home with a bit of a smile thinking, oh, it's all right, I'm quite normal. I'm my normal, you know.
Thank you very much.
But yeah, when I first started to discover how I was, I certainly didn't view myself as normal. It was scary. It scared the heck out of me. Thank you
again. And Mihaela?
Yeah, so for me, it was a continuous feeling of being different ever since I was little. But basically, I started to process better this difference of mine when I started to internalize everything on a deeper level while I was around 12 years old, basically teenage years. But I remember that I had episodes of selective mutism and being shy and oversensitive ever since I was little. So basically, I think I was born this way, because all these images are recurrent, and from time to time, I still struggle with them. And yeah, but that was pretty much it. I also had episodes of burnout during my life because I was always pushing myself to follow up certain standards that were not always natural to me. And I was always trying to fit some patterns that society or parents were telling me to do while growing up. And that had a huge impact. And the more you realize that something doesn't click with this, it can be very challenging. And the road from this point to depression and anxiety is very easy, and it can have major consequences in the long run. Yeah, and when I had the revelation was basically when the COVID started. That was also the moment when I found exceptional individuals, because in searching for an explanation of why I react this way, I needed to have an answer. So because in my mind, I can only overcome these challenges by understanding better who I am and where I come from. Mentally, psychologically, I already knew the background, my history, but I didn't know myself well enough, and I didn't have the right tools to move forward. So it was quite a relief when I discovered, while I was doing research on the internet, when I discovered exceptional individuals and their platform, and how well organized all the information is, and how easy you can have access to the support they're offering. It made a huge difference to my perspective, because it gave me kind of like a psychological support to move forward. I became more aware that I'm not the only one in this situation, that there are many more people struggling with the same things that I do. And it gave me hope and a better understanding of myself, and it made me realize that I'm not broke. And now I have the right tools to, at least I know what to do, so I can achieve my full potential in the long run. it was a whole process, and I'm still going through it. And but the results so far with the help of AI were very good for me, and I'm happy that I was offered the opportunity to collaborate with them today.
We'll
Can I
have
add-
the
add
further
something to what-
opportunity.
can I
Yeah,
add-
no, I was going to say we have the further opportunity to speak about that as we go. So go for it, Raj.
Yeah, I was going to say it's not always just a case of discovering what you're like, or something happens and you find out you're dyslexic. It might be the situation changes you. It might be a life event. Certainly with COVID, there's a mental health tsunami just rising. If it hasn't hit your organisation, I'm sure it will.
Absolutely.
Even for people going back to work or going back in the office. So being able to deal with people who are exceptional is one thing, but what you learn just can help you in your normal day-to-day.
Yes.
And also medication. Gosh, if somebody's taking something for depression, anxiety, nerve pain, anything neuropathic, painkillers, whatever, the list is so long. It can all affect your mood. I mean, I've been on some great mood management courses run by my local council, and you're just like, oh gosh, you know. So I mean, and you can't plan and legislate for it all. You can't know enough. It's just, so there's a certain I don't know, a certain sort of first aid kit which you might develop, which you sort of pull out things that okay, and it's useful for the people you manage. It could be useful for the team that are working with the person you manage, because they will also be affected, you know.
It gives you a whole different perspective and solutions, basically, once you are aware of the big picture of neurodivergence, I think.
Indeed. And Darl, how about for yourself?
Yeah, I can certainly relate to so many of the aspects you just brought up there: the mental health, the cycling through burnouts. Yeah, well, just to answer the question quickly, when did you first notice you're doing things differently? I'd say that they've always been pointed out to me as long as I can remember. For myself, I've always had that like hypersensitivity, internal hyperactivity, the feeling to be a hyperachiever in school up until a point. Although with that, there's probably this nuance point to be made about how people in marginalized groups tend to be valued by their utility in a normative society, like how useful they can be or assimilate. So a lot of that feeling that I've had from a really young age of that defectiveness, which is for, you know, a variety of reasons. I think I pushed like my self-worth to be defined by how serviceable or useful I can be, which then did lead to a lot of those mental health issues, like you mentioned there, depression, anxiety, and just spiraling.
You mentioned hyperlexia to me previously, Darl. Can you splash a bit of that on us?
Right. Yeah, I only came to that word through the exceptional individuals websites, the characteristics test. So I started reading really early, apparently like age 2. I just followed random people around, asking them, what letter is that? What's that word? What else to say about it? But it's left me with this weird phobia that I don't really like to talk about, but like a phobia of anagrams, palindromes, like words and text looking weird, that I never recognized that as a neurodivergence.
Thank you very much. So for me, beyond age 6, it was all downhill from there. I didn't find primary particularly supportive at all. Secondary promised support, unlike primary, but it didn't really manifest either. And then coming into college, I was able to build up my academic credits to go to university. And then at university, I came across something I hadn't seen in a while, because I always went for IT subjects to make sure I was close to a spell check. But then I was faced with this doom that was a handwritten test. And I said, can't do it. They said, why? I said, dyslexia. They said, can you prove it? I said, no. And within a month, I'd been assessed, and it'd been explained to me. And they said, PS, you've got dyspraxia as well, which is something I'd never heard of to that point, but they did explain it, and it explained a lot. And so my so into my 20s by this point, you know, I finally didn't feel like a fake because I had my documentation. And not only that, for the first time, a sense of community around that built up, because I did get my computer for my test, and there was a good number of us, some of whom I recognized from classes. And so for the first time, it was like, oh, you're dyslexic, me too. That dropped off when I entered the work market, which I'll get back into later, perhaps. But my question now is, what were the milestones for you in terms of not receiving support you did need, or getting things you didn't know you needed? Who wants to take that?
Happy to sort of kick things off.
Go for it.
I didn't twig I needed support until I probably failed my degree. I'd failed my GCSEs and retook them, failed my A-levels and retook them, failed my degree, couldn't retake it because I took in an extra year. And it was at that point I sort of got assessed, you know, spoke to someone, got assessed for dyslexia. And it was the fact that all my lecturers said, you can talk the talk, you do the studying, and it's great to hear you, but you can't, you know, where's your essay? Where's your dissertation? I was like, I just struggle with writing stuff down. And it's amazing how far you can get through life with all of that. And then the same with work, I would just avoid writing things down. I probably still do. I'm late with stuff. I procrastinate, you know, try and find a reason out if you work with people who sort of don't hand things in on time. If there's a, you know, if it just keeps happening, it's not usually because they're lazy. Mine was because I just hate writing stuff down. So, and then you find out, oh, look, there's tools, not all of which work for you. Some do. So yeah, the end result of, or the results at different times have been, yeah, all those things of depression and anxiety and other things that have manifested mentally. I've lost weight. I've lost like 30 kilos in a few months because of stress and burnout. I've also had it creep on at times, and, you know, but I have seen my weight chart, which sort of like which plummets whenever I've had a massive amount of stress. My relationships, I've lost friends. I've certainly affected my mood, and I've ended up affecting my relationship and getting divorced. So, I mean, you know, I'm probably it can be extremes. It can just be like you ignore it and it's fine and life goes on great. You know, I had a great job. I never thought I'd ever earn 50k in my life. I was like, result. And then it just, bang, I'm working in a post room and sort of like, whoops. So yeah, it probably took 10 years off the life of my folks. They never, certainly my dad was like, not my son, you know, not my son. How can you lose your job? You know, how can you not function? So yeah, it can be destroying. It can be something then at times where you just learn to deal with it. And then, you know, when people are laughing and joking about you at work, because it's like, God, that guy's half asleep. I mean, yeah, because I found out the pills I'm on were making me drowsy. Just didn't know. You know, how can he have been earning X amount and flying around Europe and whatever? He can't even hold a conversation. Yeah, it hurts. It hurts. Looking back now, I think, gosh, and you know, your company can have all the rules and support and everything in place. It's quite difficult when it's just you and a few other people. So yeah, extremes, let's say.
Extremes, yes. Ups and downs, actually. For me, my whole life was the route was with ups and downs, basically. Every time a change or I had to go to a major change, or I had to adapt to new circumstances, I always felt this pressure that I'm not fitting properly, that I'm not adjusting to the right rhythm, or to the rhythm that other people expect from us. And especially when it comes with cultural biases and all sorts of negative reactions, that can be very tough. And it only amplifies the feeling of being low while going through this. And for me, the milestone was, I think it was the most important milestone was when I was 12, and then when I was 20, when I got to the university, and I realized that I will need to adapt in my own ways to the academic rules and to what was expected from me. And then when the COVID came, when I had to adapt to a completely more challenging circumstance, and that's when I started to actually thinking seriously about doing something about it, so I can be more happy, more productive in the long run. So I can end up living the balanced life that I dream about, like we all do. We need this. And sometimes it can be very confusing not having the right resources, the right information about it. And you need to juggle with a lot of information. And then one day when you discover yourself and when you understand better who you are, then you can actually do something about it. Whether it's medication or therapy, professional support, all this matters.
Thank you.
Tremendously.
Excellent. And Darl?
Yeah, hearing Raj talk about his school life or how education went for you, it reminded me how, like, around the middle of secondary school, I was aware that I loved learning, but it was that application of the knowledge that I really struggled with, and the executive function aspects, handing in the homework on time, just like procrastinating and having to pull all-nighters more than anything really.
Procrastination is actually something very common, I think, for me in particular.
Yeah, that word follows me around like a shadow. Yeah, but it led me to, I guess, drop out of uni eventually. Not being able to define what I was experiencing meant that I couldn't really access the support that I needed. And after that, I've spent a large part of my adult life underemployed, hospitality, where like my bar was just make enough money to travel and hang out with my friends, and other things will figure themselves out. But there was a turning point in the pandemic or just before where I discovered coaching and decided to pursue that as a qualification, which probably paved the way to figuring out that ADHD is how I define what was going on, and getting that diagnosis, getting the medication, all of that coupled together pretty much brought me to exceptional individuals. Like the job description was like those things. Yeah, and the discovery just keeps going. Like you could say that there's this epiphany moment, but they never really stop, and the support needs to be ongoing as life shifts and changes.
Yeah, that's the beauty of it.
I think what you said about support is, support has changed. There is support there. You can do it yourself to a point. You can go on this great journey of discovery off YouTube and Google and whatever, and become experts and finding out consultants and different treatments around the world for different things. But I mean, even with the development of TikTok, there's some fascinating experts that you sort of get in touch with and get a snippet from. There's some really good AI tools that are around mood management, depression, that are out there that you can download an app, and it's got really good. I mean, not just to check in and how's your mood today, but you've said this question and they reply with this. I'm more than happy to share any tips and hints. But you definitely, you do have those moments. I mean, I'm finding this quite cathartic, because hearing that, I think my worst two moments were when I was crying in the chapel at St George's Hospital because I just needed a place to sit, and this priest came out and said, I thought I'd get up because I'm Hindu Christian sort of, and he said, no, yeah, you sit there. And he said, no wonder you're crying. You don't know what's wrong with you, and you don't know what to do about it. And that helped. And the other really bad moment, when my daughter was 14, came to see me because I got divorced, and she sat next to me. And when she left, said, Dad, are you going to be here tomorrow? I said, of course I am. And he said, no, Daddy, you're going to be here tomorrow. And she left, and I just burst out in tears. And it was like, oh my gosh, is this where my life's ended up? And you might be thinking about neurodiversity and whatever, but at that moment, I didn't know any of this. It was just like, gosh.
Yes, indeed.
And now I'm on holiday with her for a week, and she's 21, and she's going off to Mexico and doing all sorts. So it's
great.
finding it quite useful and cathartic, really.
It is, and speaking of that, it's very important to have the right people that support you from the beginning, not not ending up having the support later rather than sooner. Because in autism, for instance, I think the number one death cause of death, is depression, suicide caused by depression and anxiety. And in a lot of cases, people are misdiagnosed, or they're giving the wrong medication that might make their symptoms worse or their condition worse. And it's vital to address this type of problem from the beginning. And having a platform which has not only the resources altogether, but also the right type of support. And it could have multiple ramifications in society in general. And the more people access this type of resources, the better in general, because it can then change. I mean, what I'm thinking now is that maybe we can all join and we can contribute more, we can participate, we can advocate a little bit more about neurodiversity. And if we all join to be an active part of research, for instance, of neurodivergence, maybe then in time we can attract more people who can tell their stories more, to get a better understanding of what this actually means and how important it is for the good rhythm of life in general.
I absolutely co-sign early intervention, Mihaela. And also another thing though is an expression you hear a lot is let's keep the conversation going. But my feeling is at some point that conversation needs to lead to something. And I think in the realm of neurodiversity, it absolutely has. But in some areas, they still seem to be talking about it more than doing something about it.
Yeah.
And so as a takeaway for today, two things, one of which I mentioned earlier is for you, the audience, treat everything together, but the separate parts. Don't treat it as one thing or not treat anything. And also the onus isn't on the employer, but the more you can do regarding assisting with diagnosis, because a lot of people have these things and aren't aware of it or can't prove it. At the moment, that's got to be dealt with through GP or privately, and it can take a long time through a GP and can be very expensive privately. So the more employers electively take that on board, the better it will be in the long run. So I'd like to close us off by just asking, what would you like the takeaways to be for the audience in terms of how you think things should be moving forward, or what you found most useful?
Yeah, go ahead, Mihaela.
So it might sound like I'm speaking from a naive perspective, but I personally dream that soon we will all be a part of a world in which and headhunters searching for professional unicorns come directly to communities like exceptional individuals, because they know that that's the place where they can find a lot of hidden gems. I dream of a world in which neurotypicals and neurodivergents are educated on the same level of awareness, so we can share ideas and work together productively without any cultural biases, but with kindness and respect to each other's boundaries and the different spectrums we perceive the world. And I strongly believe that with the right platforms and tools, we can show people who use stigma and prejudice to mirror people like us what neurodivergence can actually look like and the positive outcomes it can create in reality. So yeah, AI is definitely a platform that can bring all these elements together. And I think that with the right projects, it has the power of bringing people together and even show scientists and governments who we are and what we are capable of, and the potential of expanding the positive effects this type of awareness creates to society through multiple ramifications, like I said.
Thank you, Mihaela.
So basically.
Anyone else?
I could probably list a dozen things, but I would just emphasize community, a word that's come up time and time again, but more through a lens of acceptance and understanding rather than just tolerance or like diversity for the sake of diversity. It doesn't really mean anything to have a diverse workforce if you're not actively pulling everyone into the conversation and letting them use their uniqueness and the best of themselves in that space.
Thank you. And Raj, anything?
But yeah, just briefly, I'll say, don't over-examine. No paralysis via analysis. Don't spend too long on this. It's just do something about it. It works. There's help there.
Thank you. So just to expand on my earlier point about separating the elements before treating them all, I would say that learning differences, disability and mental health, these are separate things and they should be treated together but separately. Back to you, Selma.